Hey guys, welcome to the ultimate motivational video. I'm gonna share how I went from being a bitter incel to being successful with women, how I went from being dead broke to having a successful business, and how I overcame a deadly disease that had me bedridden for half a year. This is going to give you guys the motivation you need to overcome any challenges that you're facing. There was essentially three major challenges I had to overcome in my life. The first was a complete inability to talk to women. I wasn't always good with girls. In fact, I used to be downright terrible. In high school, I would cope by smoking weed and basically hanging out with other incels. But then when I got to college, there was no longer an option because my group of friends in college was actually semi-decent with girls, except for me. I was a virgin, I was an incel, and I wasn't gonna let anyone find out. This was my deepest, darkest secret. I thought it was the equivalent of like being a serial killer. If everyone found out, my life would be over. And I would make up stories whenever the topic of girls came around, be like, oh yeah, I remember that girl, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, I was talking out my ass. And one day, I got called for it, just like the 40-year-old virgin. So I must have said something that was extremely socially autistic. One of my really good friends looked at me, he's like, you're a virgin, aren't you? And I confessed, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, fuck. Everyone knows my deepest, darkest secret. My life is over. My social life is over. Like, this is so embarrassing. But the real question was, why was I a virgin, right? And it wasn't because I wasn't trying. I was actually going out 4 or 5 nights a week. I was going to every party, approaching every girl. I was just taking nonstop L's. Why? Well, it essentially came down to 2 reasons. The first is that I had really bad social anxiety. So every time I would talk to a girl, my heart rate would go 10,000 miles per minute. I would clam up, I would get sweaty, I wouldn't know what to say. And it really, in order to talk to a girl, I need to have 7 or 8 drinks. But if I had 7 or 8 drinks, I became really sloppy and it was like a catch-22. The second reason is I had no idea what I was doing. Everything I knew about girls came from movies and TV shows, which is obviously not a really good place to learn from. My strategy literally was be really nice to a girl, become her friend, and hope at some point she hooks up with you, right? A very ineffective strategy, a typical nice guy approach. I remember one night, I literally had a hot girl who was attracted to sleeping in the same bed as me, and I did absolutely nothing. I was paralyzed with fear. I didn't make a move because I didn't want to creep her out. Next day, obviously, she lost respect for me, and of course, all my friends made fun of me because it was ultra cringe. I didn't lose my virginity until I was 19 on a beach in Mexico. It sounds pretty cool, but in reality, I was wasted. The girl was like 250 pounds and I lasted 10 seconds. But at least it was a step in the right direction. It took me another 1.5 years before I had sex again because, again, I kept going out over and over and over again, but I was spinning my wheels because I had no idea what I was doing. I thought I was the only one who had this issue. The real thing that changed the trajectory of my life was one of my really good friends gave me the book, The Game. This was when I was about 22. And when I read the book, it was a massive weight off my shoulders. So I thought I was the only one who had this issue. And then I realized there's other people. Imagine, you have a disease and you think you're the only person on earth who has this disease. And then you realize there's a whole bunch of other people who have this disease. They have a community and there's a whole bunch of people who have recovered from this disease and there's actual medicine and treatment plans. It is so relieving, right? So then I basically deep dived into the pickup community. I went really hard on it. Unfortunately, I think I was mildly socially autistic. So it took me a lot of massive amounts of repetition, trial and error to really pick this up. It wasn't until I was 23, 24 when I can say I really had this part of my life handled. And that wasn't until I went through thousands of approaches, thousands of rejections, just constant pain, constant suffering to get to a point where I had this area of my life handled. The second major challenge I had to overcome was being broke as fuck. I want to be clear though, I come from an upper middle class family. I had a good upbringing, so it had nothing to do with that. It was simply that after college, I moved out to LA and I wanted to make it on my own. And that meant I wasn't going to take any money from mommy and daddy. That also meant that I was going to have a tiny room in a 10-person house in the hood in LA. My roommates were so ratchet that one day one of them, male, beat the shit out of another one, female, simply because she moved his laundry. It was a fucking shit show. The police got involved in everything, right? It was crazy. I also remember I would sit on the porch every evening and we had this massive fence around the property because it was a sketchy area, and I would just watch the homeless people just roam around like zombies. There's constantly shooting, stabbings. I'm surprised, literally, honestly, nothing happened to me. This also meant that I was eating ramen noodles every day. I would go to CVS and buy a 10-pack of ramen, buy some bananas, and that was my food for a week. I even developed stomach problems because my diet was so poor. But again, I was determined to make it my own, and I was fascinated by sales, so I decided to get a sales job. But unfortunately, I had no experience, so they started me off commission only, and I really wasn't that good at sales when I first began. I was just constantly making mistakes over and over again, taking L's. I'd go through like 20 L's to get 1 W. But again, I was determined. I watched a lot of videos, I read a lot of books. I was also, most importantly, willing to learn from other more successful salespeople at the company. And I slowly started to improve. And it was like an exponential type of thing. I remember I got 3 promotions in the span of 2 years. I went from being commission only to being hourly and commission to being salary plus bonus plus commission, etc. I was comfortably making 6 figures, and I was even training the other salespeople. Seriously, I was the sales trainer at one point in my career. Unfortunately, the company I worked for, the company I dedicated 4 years of my life to, just went bankrupt overnight. Everyone lost their jobs. 500 people were out of work. And I became really disillusioned with the corporate world. This idea that I could lose my whole livelihood due to no fault of my own was really frustrating. So I knew I had to start my own business, and PWF was what came out of that. But PWF was not an instant overnight success story. The first year of playing with fire, I made like 0 money. The second year, I made minimum wage. It wasn't until the third year that I was actually financially successful. And there was massive amounts of setbacks I faced. I had Tinder threatening to sue me getting kicked off Facebook due to the Vice article. I had Stripe kicking me off as their payment processor, and just so many issue after issue after issue. And all these issues kind of happened as soon as I launched the product. So it was a whole bunch of things that happened within a very short time span. But again, I was determined. I was going to make it. And I pushed through that, and I knew there was going to be something on the other side. Unfortunately, there was. The third and by far hardest thing I have to ever overcome was my health issues. So around 2015, when things were going pretty well, I started noticing some minor health problems. It started off with just my knees hurting when I would walk for too long, my neck hurting, and some mild anxiety. But then every week it would get a little worse and a little worse. I started going to doctors, and none of them had any idea what was wrong with me. I must have gone to 30, 40 doctors, and all of them said, "You look fine, there's nothing wrong. Maybe you'll go away in a few days. Try taking some Advil," that type of thing. But I was just getting worse and worse and worse. And it was really, really scary because I just saw my life just literally going away. I thought I was going to die because I just kept going downhill and downhill and downhill, and no one had any idea what was wrong with me. Now, at this point, I got kind of lucky. There was one doctor who was able to diagnose me. He saw right away there was Lyme disease. We did the test. I tested positive, and I started treatment. The treatment took about a year for it to really start working, but eventually I got better. Unfortunately, in 2017, I relapsed, and I relapsed really, really hard. This time, though, the same treatment I did in 2015 didn't work, right? I guess the bacteria had become resistant. So I started new treatments, but none of them were really working. It got to a point where I was straight up bedridden. I was just laying in bed all day, right? That's how much I hurt. And from the moment I woke up in the day to the moment I went to sleep, I was having a constant panic attack. It was a never-ending panic attack. I had really, really bad anxiety, really bad depression, and I became borderline suicidal. Because if you can't walk, you can't watch TV, you can't do anything, and you're insanely depressed and anxious, what is the point of life? But again, fortunately at this point, I had experienced enough setbacks and trauma and become resilient enough that I was able to push through that. If I didn't experience all the setbacks I had previously in my life, honestly might have taken my own life at this point. But again, I had that massive shield built in, and I knew that if I just kept pushing and pushing and trying, eventually I could come out on the other side. And eventually I did. Now, of course, I still have Lyme disease, I still have issues, but I live a fully functional life. I could do whatever I want, I could travel, I have a girlfriend, blah, blah. So again, I'm far from being bedridden. And again, that was only because I was able to massively push through the pain, literally, until I came out on the other side. In order to give you guys extra motivation, I also want to share some other stories with you from other people. So here is an interaction I posted to the YouTube community tab. This guy messaged me and said, "Hey man, I just want to thank you real quick with your text game advice. I was able to meet this girl who's the love of my life now, and we're doing a trip to Brazil next month and talking about moving to Florida together. Thanks so much." Now the part that's missing here is the fact that he struggled massively leading up to this and having a girlfriend or just being successful with girls in general. Here's another one. "Hey man, reaching out after watching your most recent video with these hater victims in your DMs. I actually studied your Tinder and online dating advice for a year before I was able to get any matches at all. I had a ton of work on myself to do before physically and mentally I could upload more effective photos to my profiles that pull high amounts of matches, better haircuts, facial hair, lost 35 pounds, built some muscle, changed my clothing style, got new glasses, which actually helped my attraction slightly. And I just took photos of myself everywhere for months after months in tons of social, athletic, and leisure situations." It's a guy who's clearly willing to put in the work. Eventually, after a year, my dating profile was optimized as strongly as I could make it. I'm considered average in my opinion, and serious matches started coming in hot. I studied your text game advice, which was a game changer at this point. I was landing 3-4 dates a week, and my whole lifestyle changed. I went from 4 years of no sex or attention from girls to having multiple girls consistently DTF and down to hang out. And that's basically my story as well. Thanks for your courses, videos, and advice, truly life-changing. And here's one more. Thanks again for doing what you do. God, that last girl coming over again. If your work improved my quality of life in meaningful, significant ways, but productivity can really suffer from not getting laid. Also, one that really resonated with me, because when I was in college or when I was in my early 20s, I wasn't getting laid, I couldn't really focus, right? Like, you kind of need to have a girl in your life. You need to be able to get laid so you can really be effective at your purpose and the other thing that you're doing, right? And again, I've heard plenty more stories like it. There's a lot of guys who turned their life around. I've told the story about the guy with cerebral palsy who went from having to constantly pay prostitute to actually getting a girlfriend from Tinder, right? So there's a lot of guys who can turn it around. And what I want to do is give you guys the motivation. But the one pattern you're going to see that me and all these guys have in common is massive level of persistence. Not taking a victim mindset, not blaming the circumstances, not complaining about it, not bitching on the internet, but actually controlling what we can, maximizing every area of our life and taking massive action. And that is how you're going to be able to transform your life as well. All right, hopefully you guys found this video valuable. If you're enjoying this motivational content, then please hit the like button, hit subscribe, click the bell for notification, and share this video with a friend or two who's going through a tough time. Also, make sure you guys check out our brand new PWF Clips channel. We're taking highlights from debates, podcasts, internet arguments, and putting them on there. Thank you guys for watching, and until next time.